So Ayuki, so we're going to be recording this session, everyone. Ayuki, and welcome to the WKRP Speaker Series. This is the first of two sessions. The next is going to be on the 29th of June at the same time at 2 p.m. And we're really excited that all of you are able to join us today. So our sessions today, we're going to have two sessions on agroforestry research and also on wildlife studies in the Klamath Mountains. And Jody, can you progress the slides for me? So our agenda, we're right now in introduction, started a little late just to make sure people were able to join us. And the first session, starting at 2:10, is going to be agroforestry in the Klamath with UC Berkeley and Karuk Department of Natural Resources. So it's going to be a collaboration of a number of folks on here sharing their lessons learned and research results from a project that's been going on for many years here on the Klamath. And then at 3:10, and I guess we'll finish a few minutes early there and open up for some questions. And then at 3:10 to 3:55, we'll move over to the KDNR wildlife team to share their research and findings, also in collaboration with Berkeley. And then we'll close at 3:55 p.m. Next slide, Jody. So my name, I'm Colleen Rozier. I think I know all of the panelists, except I don't think Thomas we've met, so I'm excited to meet you. And I am the Pickout Field Institute Program Manager here at Karuk Department of Natural Resources. So as this is a Zoom webinar format, all of the panelists have audio and video, and I appreciate you guys muting while I'm talking. And but the participants, you don't have audio or video, but we would really love it if you would introduce yourselves in the chat now. Just say, your name and where you're coming from to join us today. And if you have questions, you can put those in the Q&A section. If you can see, that's down at the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A, and I will be working with Jody and Luna to make sure we address those questions as much as we can at the end of each presentation. And as I mentioned before, our session today is recorded, just so that you know, and it will be posted to the WKRP website, which I guess is right there in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen right now. So with that, I will turn it over to the Berkeley KDNR team to present on their agroforestry research, and look forward to hearing and learning from all of you.
Great. Thank you, Colleen. I'm just going to load up our slide deck here. All right, great. Well, thank you so much, and Colleen, for the warm welcome and introduction, and also thanks to Jody for organizing the workshop series. We'd also like to thank the Karuk tribe, and especially the Karuk Department of Natural Resources, for welcoming us in their ancestral territory and partnering with us on this project. My name is Jennifer Sauerwein. I'm a cooperative extension specialist at UC Berkeley. And today we're going to be presenting on our agro-ecosystem resilience and cultural foods and fibers revitalization initiative. Hus Nueti, we are caring for it. Which is a 3-year collaborative research project of the Karuk Berkeley Collaborative, including representatives from the Karuk tribe, UC Berkeley, and the US Forest Service. Core members of our team you can see here in the images on our slide here, and also listed below. And today we have Sean Bork, Lisa Hillman, Frank Lake, Sean Hogan, Andy Lyons, Kathy McCovey, Megan Musioki, Vicki Preston, Dan Sarna-Wojcicki, Jennifer Sauerwein, myself, thank you, Tripp, and Christopher Weinstein. I just wanted to acknowledge all of the incredible collaborators and partners on the project. So today we're going to begin by providing a general overview of project goals and objectives, followed by a description of our field research methods, including a really beautiful video which illustrates the integration of both Indigenous and Western science in our research approach. We're then going to share some additional research methods and tools that have been developed to help build a more comprehensive picture of the effects of land management and climate change on cultural use species. We're then going to engage in a discussion about some of our research findings and publications, including our forthcoming resilience report. And then we're going to briefly discuss some data visualization tools that we've co-created. And we'll close with some next steps and welcome discussion about opportunities for synergies moving forward. So the overarching goal of the project is to promote and enhance the resilience of cultural agroecosystems under variable climatic conditions within the Karuk Aboriginal territory in the Klamath River Basin. And for those of you who may be less familiar with the term, agroecosystems can be defined as communities of plants and animals interacting with their physical environments that have been modified and stewarded by people to produce food, fiber, fuel, and other resources for human consumption. So to achieve this overarching goal, we've been conducting research to improve our understanding of the historical and contemporary patterns of agroecological diversity, including the distribution and abundance of cultural foods and fibers, and the impacts of changing land management practices and climate change over time on cultural resources. We've also been developing decision support tools in partnership with the tribe for improved land management and agroecological resilience. And we've been providing training and research, analysis, mapping, and visualization techniques to youth and to Katie and our staff to support habitat assessment and management into the future. As you can see here, we had 7 objectives in the grant. Today, we're going to focus primarily on objective 1, the agroecosystem condition assessment. But we'll be touching on all 7 objectives. So if you're interested and want to learn more on any of them, you can reach out to any one of us. And we have all our contacts on the last slide. So to provide a little context for this project, it builds on and responds to several prior initiatives, including the Karuk Climate Change Vulnerability Assessment, which found that climate change poses a threat not only to the Klamath ecosystem, but to Karuk culture, which is intimately intertwined with the presence, use, and management of cultural use species. It also builds off of our food security study, which found that 70% of tribal households in the Klamath Basin reported never or rarely having access to all the cultural foods they wanted. And nearly 67% identified climate change as a major barrier to accessing cultural foods. We also recognize that climate impacts are compounded by legacies of resource extraction and fire suppression, and also are affecting the timing of plant phenology, harvests, and reproductive cycles, and overall human health effects. So to better understand and to potentially mitigate climate effects on cultural resources, we developed both short and long-term research questions. As you can see here, the short-term questions really centered around assessing the current condition, accessibility, quality of culturally significant habitats and focal plants in the Karuk ancestral territory. We asked, what are the historical and contemporary stressors affecting the health and vitality of these spaces and plants? How might these sites be managed to enhance productivity and quality of cultural ecosystem services under changing climate conditions? And what indicators should we be monitoring for over time? In terms of long-term questions, how are these culturally significant habitats and plants changing over time in response to land management and climate change? So overall, our hope is that our findings and tools that we've co-created on this project can support enhanced productivity and resilience of cultural ecosystems into the future.
Jennifer, can I interrupt you for 1 second?
Yeah.
There's a bit of a black box on the one side of your screen. I'm wondering if you have if you can move that. Yeah. Yes, that's great. And then something right up at the top.
Oh, that I don't know how to get rid of.
Okay, well, that isn't as much. I think we can see them a lot better now.
I wonder if I could put this down here.
That's great.
It's just the kind of the panel. I'm not sure how to hide that.
Yeah, that's perfect, actually.
Is that better? Okay.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, no worries. No worries. That's perfect. You interrupted at just the right time because I have wrapped up the intro and I'm going to pass it over to Megan now, who will discuss our field methods.
Perfect.
Excellent.
Hi, I'm going to be talking about the agroecosystem condition assessment, and this is a co-design monitoring and research survey. We work together with the Karuk Department of Natural Resources, working closely with researchers from UC Berkeley to design this survey that integrates Karuk traditional ecological knowledge and approaches to assessing forest health with Western science ways of knowing and methods common to ecology, forestry, botany, and social science. And the goals of this survey and monitoring tool are to determine what makes cultural plants resilient to climate change socially and ecologically, to improve understanding of the current conditions of cultural food plants and associated habitats, to build a long-term infrastructure for Karuk Department of Natural Resources to monitor the effects of climate change and management, and to generate reports, articles, and useful data that can support climate adaptation and mitigation and land management decision-making. Oh, next slide. So this ACA survey was carried out, back please, on different sites throughout Karuk Aboriginal territory. And these sites were selected as culturally important sites that are currently or historically used for gathering areas. And they have a diverse range of food, fibers, and regalia or medicinal species. Sorry for the distracting noise, my daughter's here. They're regions of tribal and Karuk Department of Natural Resources monitoring and management priority. And within these sites, it's uniform vegetation type and structure. And we try to identify unique biophysical settings among the sites, but uniform BPS within the sites. They covered a range of our focal plant species, and we aimed to select areas that were highly accessible for a range of different age groups. Half of our sites included riparian areas, and many of our sites overlapped with current data collection efforts, such as the Karuk Wildlife Department program or treatment areas within the WKRP program. And so we established 9 plots in 2019 and 2020, and plots are basically 60 by 60 meter areas of forest. And here are all 9 plots with a little bit more information about the focal plants and other management synergies with other projects in the region. Next slide, please. In addition to plots, we also had smaller areas called patches. And these were 10 by 10 meter areas that were really focused around a single focal plant species. And here is Lisa Hillman collecting bear grass in one of our patch sites. Next slide, please. So in the ACA survey, we focused on 21 different focal plant species, and you can see these range from plants used for fibers, for basket weaving, basketry sticks, range of different foods and medicines. And we tried to have 2 different replicates of each species across all plots and patches. Next slide, please.
Next slide, please.
So within the development of our ACA methodology, we were kind of inspired by a few different existing methods. And one of them was the FireMon, the Fire Effects Monitoring and Inventory System. And this is a set of methods used by the U.S. Forest Service to document fire effects and plan for future treatments. And the FireMon is like a publicly available methodology that includes standard sampling manuals, databases, field forms, and even analysis programs. And we pulled from different aspects of these methodology, and we found that the how-to field guides were particularly useful in terms of learning how to do the line intercept method and the quadrat sampling. Next slide, please. In addition to some of the quantitative categorical data that we recorded on our survey forms, we conducted a range of interviews in the field with cultural practitioners, with Kathy and Vicki and Lisa. And these were done through audio recording or videos, and just hearing about assessments of the health and climate stressors in our plots and assessments of the harvest. And additionally, interviews were done with cultural practitioners out of the field on the history of land use and management in our plots. Next slide, please. And the last method that we pulled from was the CRAM, the California Rapid Assessment Method. And this was used to assess wetland and riparian areas, creeks, rivers, seeps that were in or near our aqua plots. And Dan was the leader of this methodology, and it was used to survey the ecological and hydrologic conditions of wetlands and riparian areas. In addition to this survey, cultural practitioner surveys were conducted around focal plants in the riparian areas. Next slide, please. So through all the development and discussion of this method, we ended up with 5 different separate surveys that are done through different intervals throughout the year. In addition, photos and audios and video recordings were taken, herbarium specimen collection, and 360 photos in drone 360s in our plots. Next slide, please. The first survey component is the plot establishment survey, and this is first completed when a plot is established in the spring and thereafter at 5-year intervals. And it's really the baseline data collection for each plot, which includes the general description of the plot and vegetation, animal activity, inventory of vocal species. And this is when we do canopy cover using the line intercept method for shrubs and trees, and herbaceous cover using the quadrat. Also 360 photos are captured. Next slide, please. Comparably, if we're working in a patch, we do the external patch assessment survey, and this is completed when the patch is first established and 5-year intervals thereafter. And it is the baseline data collection event for a patch, assessing general vegetation, animal activity, and establishing the focal plants patches. Next slide, please. The second component is the seasonal visit survey. So this is completed once a month from May to November, or at least 3 times during this active growing and harvest season. And it's a time to visit the plots and assess any type of climate stress that's evident, soil moisture conditions, animal activity, and take note of plant phenology. Next slide, please. The last component of the survey is the harvest visit survey, and this is completed at each patch and plot when the focal plants are ready to harvest. It's a survey led by the cultural practitioner, assessing the quality and quantity of the harvest in the field through audio recordings, as well as the form that's part of the harvest survey. And then the second component of this is really taking the harvest home and accessing it through processing and actively using it in terms of the quality and taste and volume. Next slide, please. So the ACA was originally developed as a paper survey form, and then after the first season, team members developed it onto a digital platform called the Survey 123, and today it's housed there, and the data is collected digitally on iPads. And now I believe I'm going to hand it off to Vicki and Kathy, and they're going to show you a video of at one of our plots at Tishonic.
Ayuki, it's Vicki Preston. Just want to introduce this video that kind of summarizes like the activity that we would be doing at one of the plots, kind of like going through what one of our visits would look like when we do the monthly visits. This one was done with me and Kathy, and I think a lot of what Megan showed was in the data that we took in is like a large part of that is getting feedback from cultural practitioners. So in this video especially, we'll kind of like go through that process and of visiting the plot and kind of like going through the process of seeing, comparing our thoughts on what we'd seen before and what it looks like now in the seasonal visits. So comparing it to how that plot looks in different seasons of different years. And the video is mostly Kathy talking. So, and I did the filming. So I think whoever's going to pull it up can go ahead and pull it up. And then if there's any questions after, we can talk about it. But it is kind of just to show the process of how we went about going to each of the plots and examining them.
Kathy McCovey. I'm a member of the Karuk tribe of California. I look dorky, huh?
No, you don't.
Okay, let's try to get cut. Take. Ooh, this is pretty. I like this backdrop.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. My name is Kathy McCovey. I'm a member of the Karuk tribe of California. I was born and raised in Happy Camp in Orleans. We're in Orleans right now. I went to school. I started working for the Forest Service when I was about 18 years old, and I worked for them for 40 years doing archaeology, anthropology, forestry, and fire. I retired and now I work for the Karuk tribe of California, and what we're doing is climate change studies. I've been gathering down here on these manzanita berries. You can see that they're in bloom now. And this is one of our racket plots. We've been monitoring these bushes specifically for 3 years. I hope to capture maybe a pattern or something. It's just part of the observations is why are there no berries over here but a lot of berries over there? Does that correlate with something that went on weather-wise this year?
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of things that I think about. We can monitor a lot of our cultural plants and see what is happening to the plants. The climate is changing. Things are getting different. The seasons are changing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure there's a variety of factors that contribute to that. But what we need to know as Karuk people, people of the land, people who have always been there, and we will always be here, is what is happening to our plants, like this beautiful manzanita.
Mm-hmm.
There's deer. Deer coming through here. See right here?
Oh, yeah. Pretty fresh, too.
Yeah, small. Elk poop. Little varmints been coming in here and just kind of digging around, and then the other predators come in and feed off of them. So this area here is so rich in so many plant resources. With the fire going through here and cleaning it out and stimulating things, we'll be able to gather a lot of Indian potatoes, deer potatoes. And this whole area grows it really thick. And the thing with Indian potatoes is this is really sandy soil, so it's easy to dig them. You get the big ones, and then you just take the baby corms and replant them, and then the following year you will have more food. They're really nutritious bundles of energy and good nutrients and minerals that come up in the springtime for the local native people to eat. This looks like it's dying, which is good. I hope it is. This is the weed that we try to get rid of somewhere. Is this the Scotch broom? I can't remember. Okay, so this one is right in the middle of this manzanita patch. And in some areas, it's got such a good root system and it's so strong and branches out that it pushes the manzanita away. So this is what we're trying to get rid of. I'll have to come back and see, these are pretty.
I hope
it killed it.
Yeah, I hope the fire killed it.
I think it might have been the fire, yeah.
It's a nice spot. They burned this last year too.
Yeah, let's go look at the mugwort over here.
A lot of tracks out here.
Oh,
Yeah,
look.
they're all out here hanging out.
Cool. You got some video of that? Let me put my hand down here.
Dang. I wonder if they like that it's
Grassy?
grassy and sunny out here.
Yeah. They could probably roll around in the ash too. Things to munch on.
They can dig in here. There's not as
Oh
many
yeah,
rocks.
this is where they're hanging out. Look at that.
Dang.
That's kind of fresh. There's some fresh.
There's all sorts of, yeah.
Whoa, look at it. They're just partying it out out here. Cute. The more we move, the fresher we get. Huh? Look,
Huh.
right here. That's fresh. Look.
Oh yeah, that's fresh, yeah.
Then they bail off the side of the hill right here. Frolic on the beach. Yep, this is where the mamas raise their babies.
Oh.
You get fire through here. You get all these grasses. Look at all this animal activity. I mean, that's food. They're eating, they're just being, and it just all provides to the life force of this area.
Mm-hmm.
Fire is needed. I have not seen one negative thing that fire's done through here on our whole walk. Look at these willows over here. I think we've got some reed sprouts coming out of them. Yep, burning back and killing the older stuff allows for the younger, straighter, stronger sticks to grow. And that's what we use with our sifting and baby baskets and a lot of utilitarian. See, when they're big like this, they don't do us any good. But we like to get rid of them. And this is nice and dead. Get that out of there. And now, the new ones will come back. That's what we want.
Yeah, those nice sticks.
Yeah, look at that one too. Each one.
Oh yeah,
these
each
got
one
new
of these
sticks.
got new sticks
Good,
growing.
Yeah, look at this one.
Ooh.
Fire is good. It's a beautiful grove. A manzanita grove is what it is.
Yeah, no, these are beautiful
Yeah.
plants. I feel like they've even like kind of benefited just from like
Us being in here and the fire around here. And
the last few years.
Karuk evolved with fire. Animals and plants evolved with fire. And we all live together in happy harmony when we can, when we are allowed to. The problem is that people who don't have as deep a history and traditional ecological knowledge that the tribes and indigenous people do on the river, they're the ones setting the agenda. They're the ones making the rules. They're the ones that are stopping us from being part of this landscape. Because like other people are visitors. We're here, we're from here, and we will always be here. Thank you. So hi, this is Kathy. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Kathy.
Okay, so we wanted to have a question and answer period about this video, and I will be answering questions or forwarding them to Vicky as the question, you know, if it's in her realm of knowledge and expertise, and she had a part in it. So anyway, any questions?
All right, I'll ask people to put their questions in the chat or put them in the Q&A section. The attendees can't, I don't think, have audio, so we'll need to be funneling them that way. Beautiful video, guys. Really well done.
Thank you. Good job, Vicky.
I'll ask the first one. This is Colleen. Can you
Okay, go.
Yeah, can you tell us how, so that video, I take it, was filmed within the Akka plot itself, is that right?
Yes.
And can you talk a little bit about the role, or kind of like the surveying that you're doing with the Akka plot, and how that's kind of helping you or contributing to some of the observations that you're making in the video, if it was?
Well, with these aqua plots, it's given me a really good baseline of being able to actually have data about what the plant's doing and what it's been doing for the last 3 years. And it needed to be done because as a gatherer, I would see changes and I would notice things happening. Then I would try to talk to people about them, but they wouldn't really be seeing what I was seeing. And so it was kind of, and even people I worked with in the Forest Service, which really made for awkward conversations, you know, because I would be, you know, as a gatherer, I'm always seeing things. I'm always monitoring the plants that I'm around because for us, every plant has a use. And so we're watching the growth. And I was able to be involved in setting a foundation for an area, a landscape, a gathering area where we could, for years into the future, use the baseline information as a foundation to look and say, one, prove to people that the climate is changing. Two, to look at the climate and how it's changing and how it's affecting our cultural plants. Three, to figure out, you know, how we can be resilient. Our animals with us too. I always say, if you manage for the people, you manage for the animals, you manage for the animals, you manage for the people.
Awesome.
So that's it.
I've gotten a couple more questions coming in the chat and also the Q&A box, and people feel free to keep adding. So Lulu asked when the video was made, and if it has been a while, what changes have you seen since then? This is a question, I guess, to both of you guys.
I mean, I think the video was about a year ago now, I believe. Was it longer?
Yeah, and I went to the I still go to those plants, those plots each year. And as a ecologist myself, you know, forester, cultural person, I want to see the changes. I want to understand what's going on. And this year I didn't see a lot of berries on those. I haven't seen a lot of berries, manzanita berries on those bushes for a couple of years. First year we did it, it was just, you know, we had lots of berries. They all came in at the same time. You know, we had blooms, and we have a couple different species of manzanita down there within and adjacent to that plot. Well, they were, a lot of them were blooming about the same time 3 years ago. Then 3 years ago, then year after that, they didn't seem to flower that well that year. We didn't have a lot of berries. Then the third year went that one, it was funny because on one side of the tree was all blooms, and then on the other side of the same bush was all blooms. That's what was in the video. But on the other side, there was hardly any blooms. Then this year I went down and I noticed that different species of those manzanita berries bushes were blooming at the same time. It's like we had an early flush on one species and they were all in bloom and the other species weren't in bloom. And then I went back down a couple of weeks later and then we had there really isn't a lot of berries this year on the plants in that video. However, the different species over in the other, it's a couple 100 feet away, there's a different species, and that had a lot of berries on it this year. So you could see just when I asked the question, because only one side of that bush had flowers and one side didn't, it was like, well, we had heavy rains. So with the heavy rains coming from the south and knocking the berries off or knocking the blooms off, I think if we really watch those bushes and match it with the weather events, we will learn a lot more about how that changing climate and how, the lack of rain and these sudden downpours of rains at the wrong time of year when everything's blooming is having these effects on our food resources in the future. That's all I want to say.
Perfect. Thank you, Kathy. And I think we have time for one more. So I see from Thomas Connor asked, because I know you were talking about fire and fire effects in that video, and he asked, was there a prescribed fire in that plot and or a wildfire?
Let's see, when Tashaning first burned quite a few years ago, wildfire did go through there, but then there had been no fire in there for a while until the tribe started putting prescribed fire in there. So that plot right there did have prescribed fire going through it. And that's where you could see adjacent to the plot that Scotch broom that I was breaking apart and talking about. That's what killed a lot of that Scotch broom. And we've been also, when we gather the berries, I clean around underneath the trees. And so when we're gathering, we're also cleaning and manipulating the vegetation, taking care of it, kind of fixing it up to receive fire. And that's why a lot of the manzanitas, they received fire, but they didn't get a lot of hot fire that killed them. And so that's all part of working with your plants and your garden. It's our garden. And I guess we should start referring to it as such so that people will take the mystery out of what we do and, how we interact with our all of our plants within Karuk country. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And Vicki, did you have anything to add to either of those last two questions?
No, not much. I think that I would say that it, we keep talking about the manzanita and, to point out and remind that with the surveys, we went back to the same places, the same exact bushes, for example, for the manzanita and the same exact patches. And so it was like a really, like how gatherers would do is like you're gathering from the same exact bush, you're gathering from the same exact plant, and you can really see like those like fine-grained details from really examining them like that. And I just want to say I was always like in awe of all the observations that Kathy would have while we were there, and over the years see that things definitely did change. And I know that one thing that I seen this last spring was like over the years, the health of the Indian potatoes in that area has gotten better. And I do think that the burning has been really great for, the Indian potatoes and the other plants in that area. And also the trips that the kids take to go dig out there and everything. So that's been really cool to see those observations, and whatever, and all the observations that Kathy has. So I think that's all I kind of wanted to say.
I also wanted to add, we didn't say those were elk tracks. Those big tracks on the river bar that I was gushing over, that was elk. And we we hadn't had, and I've been down, you know, when I was raised in Orleans also, and I used to go down on that river bar a lot. I would never see the signs of animals then that I am seeing now. It's like as we move into the future and seeing, instead of seeing less animals, like in some places is happening, we're seeing more animals. As you can tell, I was ecstatic over the amount of hoof prints that were there. And it's the females coming down and raising their babies along that river corridor in those willows, in those burned areas. Thank you.
Giving me chills, Kathy. That is really exciting. Well, awesome job, guys. I'm gonna move to the rest of the talk. I know we've got 15 more minutes, and then we'll open up for some more Q&A. Please, everyone, keep adding it to that Q&A spot down at the bottom, and we'll try to get to the questions at 3.
Great. Thanks so much, Colleen. And thanks so much, Vicki and Kathy, for sharing that beautiful video. It's really nicely done. We all learned so much from both of you going out to those plots. Yeah, it's great to see it wrapped up so artfully and so nicely. I'm going to talk a bit about the land use land cover change component of the ACA, the Agroecosystem Condition Assessment. For each of our ACA plots, we wanted to understand the long-term changes and patterns of land use, land management, and land cover over time. So we conducted research on historical conditions of the plots using interviews, archival documents, and aerial images. The interviews were conducted by Shay. Shay, did you want to say a couple words about the interviews?
So I'm not really, my college degree was in anthropology, so interviewing is more comfortable for me than like hard science. I've said the whole project, I'm not like a hard science guy, but it was cool to get the interviews and then match them to the photos that have over the years and everything. It was because we got different things that we could actually proof to see what if it was correct, you know, with the 64 images versus other images. Yeah, I learned a lot from the I think that was some of our strongest stuff was our interviews. There was just so many amazing people with all their history and travel knowledge of everything. I really think we got the best stuff out of all the interviews in the field and also just out of the field.
Definitely, we got some really rich information out of the interviews and conversations with cultural practitioners at the sites while we were doing the visits, the plot assessments. So we combined the interview data, and we also went through archival documents, mining records, logging records, U.S. Forest Service and General Land Office records, ethnographic records, as well as any aerial images we could find that overlap with our plots. Next slide, please. And we are looking at pre and post contact history of land use and management, any records of major disturbances, fires, floods, information about land use like patents and records of homesteading and land management on private lands. Next slide, please. We worked with Melissa Eisel-Solera at UC Davis, Andy Lyons and Sean Hogan at UC IGES to pull all of this information together into the summary figures that you see here for our 5 original ACA plots. And so with the aerial images, we georegistered the images and we manually classified the vegetation in each image for the areas around these 5 plots. Then we summed up the area of all the polygons of each land cover type in each year and plotted the change in proportions of each class over time for each site. You can see that in the third bar there. And then we also, in the 4th bar, we rasterized the classifications and used alluvial plots that group the pixels by class and traced transitions of each pixel from one class to another over time. And then we also summarized the land use and management information in that bar. That's the 2nd bar there. And you can see all of the images arrayed there. And Melissa Solera put that together in R for us. So next slide, please. We also conducted a riparian wetland assessment, as Megan mentioned earlier. We used the CRAM, the California Rapid Assessment Method for wetlands. which was developed by state and regional water boards and the SF Estuary Institute to assess the ecological health and function of riparian and wetland areas using qualitative and quantitative indices of hydrology, geomorphology, water availability, and plant community health and habitat quality. And they have these different modules for different types of water bodies and related wetlands. So for the different water bodies associated with our plots, we use the different modules to do the CRAM assessment for riverine wetlands or forested slope wetlands or lacustrine fringes and the wetlands around lakes and ponds. So we completed the surveys, and we also took notes on what metrics were relevant or culturally appropriate, which ones made sense given the sites, and what our colleagues and our cultural practitioner colleagues were interested in terms of impacts of water bodies on culturally significant plant species. So the CRAM wasn't great for everything, and so to better reflect Indigenous knowledge and concerns about particular habitat features and conditions that support cultural use species, we also conducted wet-dry mapping and seasonal assessments of water levels in creeks and seeps at our plots, and also conducted focal patch and harvest surveys for any focal species in the wetlands and riparian areas associated with plots. Next slide. I think Megan is going to talk now. Next slide after this, please. Thanks.
Another component was collecting voucher specimens. So a herbarium was established during a previous collaborative grant with the Karuk tribe, and we continued to add to that collection by collecting vouchers at our plots. And I also did an overview of voucher specimens that have been collected in the Karuk Aboriginal Territory from 1876 to 2016. Next slide. We are working on, and it's almost released, a Karuk Agro-Ecosystem Resilience Report, which really reports on our findings through this application of the ACA and other methods that we've used at our plots and patches. This report covers 4 different chapters. It focuses on data that we've collected in our plots and patches, focuses on the condition of focal plants in those areas, and chapter 4 includes management and monitoring recommendations from cultural practitioners. And this report will be publicly available, and it will be out, I think, in the next few months, posted on the Karuk Berkeley Collaborative website. So chapter 4, as I said, focuses on management and monitoring recommendations, and we think this would be of particular interest to WKRP and this audience. These management and monitoring recommendations were developed by cultural practitioners, and they focus on management actions that will enhance the resilience of cultural focal species and habitats in our plots, resilience to climate change, climate variability, and management threats. The second component of the recommendations focuses on increasing resilience in riparian areas associated with our ACA plots. The third point focuses on ongoing monitoring of agro-ecosystem resilience in focal plots and patches. So continuing to carry out this ACA method and perhaps adding more plots and patches in the future. And the last component focuses on general recommendations for enhancing agro-ecosystem resilience in the Karuk Aboriginal Territory. Next slide. In addition to a report, we have a number of research papers that will be published in various journals in the works, and one that has already come out is published in a special issue of Journal of Ethnobiology focused on climate impact on Indigenous people. And this paper introduces the idea of Indigenous cultural ecosystem services, which is the interaction between cultural practices and environmental spaces and the benefits garnered from those interactions, and kind of digs in a bit more to into the climate impacts of those services, and then ultimately the impact on the benefits garnered by Indigenous peoples from those relationships. Next slide. And I believe now back to Dan.
So we also took 360 images in our plots as a potential monitoring and educational tool to look at changes over time, both seasonally and long-term changes, and to do pre and post management monitoring in terms of vegetation changes and changes in forest structure, and also to create immersive visualization tools for educational purposes. So we took 4 images at each of the subplot centers in each of our plots, our 8 plots, and we also took images in some of the riparian areas and focal patches, and we retook images at the same plots throughout different seasons to look at seasonal changes. And then one thing we did is we put together a sample tour to show some of the opportunities for immersive visualization and using the 360s in education and monitoring. So I'll just show quickly what that looks like. We don't have too much time because we want to save time for Q&A. I'll just share my screen quickly. Excuse me. Okay, so here you can see, here's our Tashonic plot, the same one that Kathy and Vicki, the video was taken at. So you can embed portals to other 360 images. You can use this in a visor as well, like a Google Cardboard. You can embed photos. Here's a photo of a manzanita harvest. There's Vicki, a bucket of manzanita berries. And you can also embed videos, video links. Here's a video embedded of a willow harvest. You can link to Vimeo videos as well. And then, as I mentioned before, you can kind of zoom around and curate tours if you want to highlight certain aspects of the plot. Here's embedded a video of Kathy doing a Indian potato harvest. So that shows some of the possibilities there. This one is, stop sharing. That was put together on a third-party platform called RoundMe. We also worked with Andy Lyons at UC IGES, who, this is password protected, so it has some amount of data security, but for more sensitive information, he also thought it would be better to create an offline viewer in our studio for viewing and storing 360 securely on the KDNR server, so he did that as well. Jenny, if you could please share the slideshow again. It was like slide 37 or 38. Yeah, oh, there we go. Next slide, please. So Andy Lyons created a offline viewer and then also showed our group how to use web maps to embed the 360 images. So you can see those little thumbnails inside that really basic base map there in the right-hand corner would be a way of embedding the 360 images and the tours inside of a web map. So we've looked at different ways of putting these images together and visualizing the sites. And I know Andy would be happy to talk with folks about how we put that together and share some of the tips and tools for using those for curriculum or for monitoring. Next slide, please. So we also conducted drone flights at some of the sites that were more open and less steep and forested, where it was safer to do so. And the drone flights were to monitor vegetation mostly. Next slide, please. That's Sean Hogan and Andy Lyons from UC IGES were responsible for doing those flights. And then Christopher Weinstein from the Karuk tribe also helped out, I believe, with some of those flights. And the data products you can see are the RGB orthomosaic, infrared, multispectral, as well as a digital surface model. And I think the idea was to do more drone flights and aerial 360 imagery and add those to the tours. So that's a potential next step for future research. And speaking of next steps, Shay, if you want to wrap us up talking about next steps and opportunities. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I think the tribe is definitely continuing to use these over time. I think it's good baseline for what's going to happen, both with WKRP, how that accomplishes, and then also with climate change, how it negatively accomplishes stuff, and how potential management helps out with climate change. Potentially, we'll have to see. I know that we have some different grants that are going to keep using or make new plots as well within this. And I really think for WKRP, the 360 stuff would be really cool for monitoring of everything that happens, when we have 2 at DNR, and they're not very expensive, but you can do really cool things with the 360s. I think it's way better than a photo monitoring point, Yeah, but I just think I'm glad we got this baseline data. I mean, the climate change has already kicked in, but at least we're getting some where it was at in a little bit, at least, so it's changing so fast though. But yeah, definitely planning on using these particular plots as well as new plots for DNR in the future.
Definitely. Does anyone on our team have anything to chime in about, or should we open up to questions? I think, in terms of next steps, I know a lot of us, some of our Rocket Corps team members like Frank Lake are already working with WKRP and their monitoring crew. So I know that we've been wanting to have a conversation with you all about how to combine monitoring methods and efforts. And so, yeah, I just wanted to put that out there that we're available to have that conversation and figure out how we can best combine our efforts on the monitoring front.
And I will say that we are hopeful to get a grant. We're likely to get a grant that would be continuing some of this monitoring work over the next couple of years. Are you guys ready for us to open up to questions?
Yeah, I was just gonna say we should open a question answer.
All right, great. One thing I will say just for the wildlife crew who will be going next, we need you all into the panelists link, which is a separate link than the participants link, so that you can all talk. And I see Emilio in there, but Ben and Jessica, I wasn't sure if we needed to move you over that way as well. And if so, you can message me directly and I can make sure you have the right link. And then in the Q&A, Devin had asked a question that I believe Shay answered. And he said, are all of the plots in currently managed or harvested areas, or are some in potential areas that would need some preparation or restoration work first? And Shay said, current or historically managed harvested. Do you want to elaborate on that at all, Shay?
Oh, yeah, I mean, I don't want to say, like Kathy and Vicky have like proven that they've been historically used. They could say more about that, but there's evidence of been continuing to use, some are currently used by people. They gather from there, like we can tell from when we do our survey harvests, if they like taking willow or whatever, but some are just with fire. I mean, the whole point of WKRP is to get these places, fire back in these places and have it be back to its potential awesomeness, and for example, the willow is really out of whack, and it was definitely used in the past, it just depends on the particular fungal species, but pretty much we tried to use ones that were historically used and could potentially be used again in the future, or people are still using the best they can with the conditions they're in.
So maybe a both, and that they are historically used and managed, and that they also, a bunch of them need restoration work to get to that
I see
level.
Devin's question is it basically depends on the focal. It says how long have they been managed, and then without management since fire suppression, basically depends on the particular patch, but in general, that's what we could say to summarize for everything,
Great. Thanks, Shay. If anybody has additional questions, please put them in the Q&A section and I'll try to catch them. If anybody else had anything they wanted to say on that, feel free to chime in, but I'm also seeing another question from Lulu Alexander asking Vicky and Kathy, have you noticed changes in the plants on the plots that you're monitoring? The taste, smell, feel, size of the plants. What have you all noticed in these plots?
Can you hear me?
Yes, it's a little bit pixely,
It's
but
Kathy.
we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Well, one of the most noticeable one is the Indian potato. As Vicky had mentioned, when we first started going there, they were maybe 9 inches tall to a foot tall, and they had little tiny bulbs. After a couple of years of prescribed burning, their bulbs are about 5 times as big. It can, the one nice one can fit in the palm of my hand, and the stem is up to 2 to 3 feet tall, and they're really thick. Also, in there where we've been burning, the mugwort has come back really thick. And so down in and that's down in Tishonic. Up in Sims, we've noticed that a lot of the Indian tea came back. Just a really, really nice, large, about 1.5 acres or so of pure black caps. And you don't usually see that anymore, with how many of those. After the first burning, we picked a lot of black caps out of there. But as the years passed, it got less and less. I think the 3rd year we went down there, the most thing we got out of there was about 48 ticks. And that was a couple, like 14 on me and 15 on my friend, and some more coming as we go down the hill. So the ticks weren't there the first year. So the plants were really lush. And so there's it's like when you burn after a couple of years, you got to go back in and burn them a couple more years, because that keeps the landscape in that forb stage. It keeps it productive. And the other one, I want to go back to David McMahon's question. How long have you historically managed area been without management? How did you identify them? Well, a lot of these came, I would say, definitely around the 30s and 40s, and we identified them by basically going out and looking and seeing what was growing where and how much of it was growing, if it was good quality, not what its relationship was to a village site. And then they talked about a lot of the prehistory and historic information they got in the anthropological and interviews. So it was really interesting for me as an archaeologist, because a lot of places that were picked out I had not been to. With like Vicky picked out a couple places. Then when I went back there, like one of our acorn groves, I found artifacts. So I'm a trained archaeologist. I was an archaeologist for the U.S. Forest Service, Six Rivers National Forest, for about 30 years. So, and my area of expertise is Northern California culture, specifically groundstone and riverine resources that the tribes use. So we can see the difference, and you can, to a certain extent, identify these old gathering areas, especially if a wildfire goes through. I'm just going to bounce the Slater fire here in Happy Camp, just uncovered all kinds of old gathering areas. And I've just been having a really good time going out and identifying them. So I hope that it helped answer any questions.
think that touches on what Dean Davis said in the chat, saying the potatoes on our property that burned in the Slater fire are more robust and abundant now.
Oh yeah, I mean, just well, it gets back to that. The most cultural plants that we have, you know, a lot of our teas, our medicines, our grazing areas for our animals are found in the oak woodland grassland, and that is found along the river corridor. And there are certain plants that like to grow there, and fire helps to renew those and to get rid of the overstory, to let those bulbs and seeds that are underground and come up. Without that, it's been like a dark cloth to me up in Slater area, like a dark cloth was pulled back from over top of all our cultural plants, and they're all coming up again now. But you have to burn every 3 to 5 years to manage those. Thank you, guys.
Awesome. Thank you, Kathy. Vicki, did you want to answer anything about changes you've noticed in the plants and the plots that you're monitoring as far as taste, smell, and feel or size? Are you still on?
Yeah, I'm here. No, I think Kathy gave a good overview. I think that that is a lot of, you know, I also think we could probably, I know folks like Kathy and I can probably talk for a really long time about the plants and the changes that we've seen like over the years. But yeah, I think those are some really good examples that Kathy spoke of.
Awesome. Thanks, Vicki. And I see Frank in the chat. Was there anything you wanted to add, Frank? I know you've been a part of this as well.
No, I think the team covered it all. Good work. And I'm fortunate to be involved. Thank you.
All right, beautiful. Thank you, Frank. And then with that, we're at 3:12, so I'm going to move us to our next session. Thanks so much, Katie and our Berkeley team and the Raka Aka Agroforestry team. That was a really great presentation. I really appreciate it. I see contact information is going in the chat. Thank you, Jennifer. So if anyone wants to reach out to folks, you have their contact information there. And with that, we'll move over to wildlife studies. And so Emilio and Thomas, and I know Ben and Jessica are also on. Welcome, and we'll turn it over to you guys. Again, anybody who has questions, please put them in the Q&A down below, and we'll be taking those at the end of the session. So wildlife, over to you.
Ayuki, can you guys hear me, see me?
We can hear you, and we can see you, yes.
All right, good. So yeah, this is just gonna be me and Thomas. Definitely invite the crew for the next time. But yeah, I was just gonna introduce myself. So Ayuki Kowara, Nanatoiti Emilio Trip, Na Karuk wa Arad, Paneni Araz kun Aram si Priv Tihanik, Chimikni Nach, Asamna Karik, Si Tiri, Wun Karik. So, hello everyone. My name is Emilio Tripp. I think everyone knows me, but yeah, I'm of the Karuk people, the upriver people. My ancestors come from the villages of Chimikni Nach, Asamna Karik, Sitiri, Wun Karik, Karu Katum In. So, I'll share my. This says. You cannot share your screen while the other participant is sharing.
You should be able to now, Emilio.
Okay. Let's see. So yeah, you guys see my Ayuki Kawara?
Yes.
All right. So yeah, this is pictures of my great grandparents. So little Ike is holding a dip net. He's at Utamin. This is below Asamna Karik, one of the villages I'm from, and this is Mary Ike, also at that same village site. So yeah, I'm a tribal person from this place, and my ancestors have been here since very ancient times, since time immemorial. And I feel extremely fortunate to work with the wildlife in my Aboriginal homelands, and the lineal connection that I have with the land, the places, the plants, and the animals runs deep within my bloodlines. And this passion, I hope, comes out in my day-to-day work. It is amazing that the Karuk people are even alive today. And it is even more amazing that we are still living in and have maintained our intimate connection to our natural environment in our Aboriginal lands. It is a story of survival, of living through a time where there was a concerted effort to cause genocide, stolen land and resources, taking of lives, including women and children, attempts to destroy the family unit, attempts to destroy intergenerational ties, destroy our tribal language, our culture, destroy our Karuk community, our society, and our systems. It is amazing that we are still alive today, and it is a testament to the strength and the resilience of the Karuk people. So in the not too distant past, we relied on everything in the natural environment for our survival. Showing a picture of my great-great-grandfather with a dip net, kind of tells that story, that it wasn't that long ago. And our family has stories of going up and hunting for deer and fishing and getting everything we needed from those villages. And so, with Karuk people being removed from those villages, there is a disconnect in that, we had that intimate knowledge, and now it's like we have bits and pieces, and we are trying to still reconnect to those pieces of knowledge to share like what it is that we need to do to restore the landscape. The impacts that settlers brought was the economic changes that we have seen are, they're all primarily extractive industries, the boom and bust of the gold rush, logging, etc. All those contributed to the ecological degradation of ecological systems and Karuk ecological systems. And so that's what we're trying to get back to. And we live in a time that that allows for that. So I feel very fortunate to be able to be a part of that, which it wasn't for my ancestors, in living through the gold rush and the logging industry. And so with that, I just wanted to share that the Karuk DNR Wildlife Program started in 2018. And when we started the program, we wanted to have a vision statement. So I'll just read the vision statement and then I'll talk about our work. So the vision of the KDNR Wildlife Program is to enhance, protect, conserve, and restore the ecological processes that the wildlife depend on in Karuk Aboriginal lands, to support the physical, cultural, and spiritual well-being of the Karuk community, and to continue this ancestral legacy of nurturing and protecting the traditional relationships of respect and reciprocity with our wildlife family for the future generations to come. So this is just a picture of a village. And yeah, so each village had their own way of treating the landscape for the plants and animals that they needed to sustain themselves. And so we really wanted to build in all those components, intergenerational continuance of our respect that we have for for the plants and animals. So we wanted to build that into our vision. One of the stories that my ancestors told was talking about hunting, and it was the blowfly and coyote story. And really what the story is about frugality and about coyote not taking too much deer meat. And blowfly, he was a hunter, but all he took was the fat from the rear end of the deer. And so blowfly was very frugal, and coyote took too much. And when he took too much, he ended up, something bad always happens to coyote, right? But really what this story is talking about is about some of the principles that we as Karuk people have. It's not to be greedy, not to be stingy, to manage our land in such a way that there is enough for not just humans, but for the plants and animals. A true interdependence with our natural environment, morality for our natural world and the living individuals in it, and not just humans, the whole ecosystem. So, and so that's what the villages represent, is that intimate knowledge. And so that's kind of what we're bridging. One of the wildlife program is trying to bridge some of those and connect with the community, the tribal community, because there is knowledge with the cultural practitioners. And so we're trying to, use modern things and join it with our TEK. So that's definitely the heart of our wildlife program, and of course DNR. So just to share some of the wildlife projects that we have been working on, and there's a lot, so I'll try to not be too detail orientated. But how this is going to work, I'm going to talk about some of the past projects, current projects, future projects, and then I'll pass it off to Thomas, and he'll share a little bit more on the data analysis side of the past projects, mainly the Karuk Elk project. And so, yeah, this is the past projects. We started the program in 2018, and we had the Karuk Elk project, and then just last spring we did a Fisher project. So just to share a little bit about the Karuk issue elk project. It was a collaborative between UC Berkeley and CDFW. CDFW gave us the funding to do it. And the main goals were to get elk population dynamics, migration timing, habitat use, and most importantly to us was the response to the restoration work going on in the Somes Bar Implementation Restoration Project. So to some of the tools and methods we used was the game cams. We had a game cam grid, 15 game cams in 4 of the project areas, so 60 total. And we had even more than that, ended up monitoring a couple more, so we have like 70 or more. And we have also fecal DNA, and that was mainly for population estimate and GPS collars. And I'll go into a little bit of each. So the game cam grid was the first things that we did. UC Berkeley had some individuals come down the very first year. Dan helped organize a kickoff meeting when we first got the grant, and they had experience with the Deer Hopland project. And so we basically used the majority of their protocols. And so they used Bushnells, And so we use the same ones. And some of the cool things that we've seen, we basically we gathered all the data, and the crew has been sorting, lots of photos. I think we're close to, I want to say at least over 250,000, and if not 500,000, getting close to 500,000 photos. And so those are all processed by species. And so some of the cool ones we've seen so far is the top one with the red arrow. You could see an antler coming out of her. It's a female, and she has one. We called her a unicorn, and so it's pretty cool to see that female with one velvet antler, and it never hardens. It's just always velvet. And so that's we always see her around, and because we were always looking for, Ben named her Waldette for Where's Waldo. So we try to come up with names. Usually they're Karuk names for all the ones we've GPS collared anyways, but this was one of the first named elk we came across. And so we get an opportunity to find individuals and identify them, and we try to recreate that intimate relationship in by naming them. And so yeah, that's Waldette. And then the blue arrow is albino squirrel, so that's pretty cool too. And yeah, these are photos found by Ben first, so that was pretty cool to see. And just a little bit on what the squirrels actually eating there is a salted wood block. And so we put those out for the porcupine project. And so we didn't get a porcupine, but we got albino squirrel, so that was cool. And so the next portion I'll talk about is the fecal DNA. And so we won't have to look at this too long. I know you guys probably ate lunch, so I'll skip to the next video. But basically we take the epithelial cells that slough off of the intestine. And so get the cells off the scat and put it in a test tube with a Q-tip. And then we send it off to Berkeley. So pretend each of these turtles are a pile of scat, and we send it off to the lab and get a marked individual. Okay, we didn't do day 1 and day 2, but we did more like month 1 and month 2. So basically we visited the same site 2 times. And on the first day, we collected all of them and sent them to the lab, and they got an individual DNA mark. Okay, so the second month, we come back to the same site and we sample it again. And of that, we had some of those individuals that we got on the first month. And so from that, sampling 2 times and analyzing the marked ones and previously marked ones, we can get a population estimate. So we started doing drive surveys to find where the elk were hanging out. And so that was one thing that we were kind of looking for. Our elk are migrational, and so they'll come down in the wintertime. And so that's when we started our work mainly for fecal DNA, is in the wintertime. And so we would do early morning drive surveys, and that was just to educate where we could potentially get a good fecal DNA site to monitor or to sample. And then the GPS collars. These were the very first year we built these corral traps, and it basically looks like a big horse corral. I should have put a picture on here, but we worked with CDFW to do that, and we just never lucked out for some reason. So in the second year, the CDFW biologist retired, and so it was kind of up to us to kind of figure out how to do this. And so we went to a training on the coast, and we figured out how they're doing it, or we got exposed to how they were doing it out on the coast. And basically what they were doing was they're shooting their tame elk herds with a chemical immobilization gun, a dart. And so they would dart them that way. So that was really, really good to learn. And one of the things we learned was that we basically can't do that locally. And one of the reasons was we seen them shoot the dart, it hit the cow, and then the whole herd ran. And so when they ran, I would say probably I don't know, 1,000 feet or something like that. It was a ways, and we couldn't find the cow at first. So this is all CDFW, and there's some other folks, but we were attending it. They're training up some of their folks from Sacramento, I think, and so we're invited. And so all of us were just looking for where this elk had fallen, because it was going to pass out, 2-3 minutes after it was darted. And so I found the main trail. I was like, okay, I know. And then another CDFW person found it. I should have found it though, because I was right there. Anyways, but it had passed out on, fell down on his chest and right on a log, and it had just collapsed its whole lungs. So they're concerned that it was gonna not be able to breathe. And so for us, like, we can't have, because we're getting our elk along the river, and we know that when the elk get disturbed, they run straight for the river, and so we don't want them passing out in the river. And so that was a concern. So we developed a relationship with some Washington tribes, and they use these clover traps. And so that's what this is a clover trap, it's called. And what we do is we cut the rope on this side once it's trapped. So the door closes, I get a message on my cell phone, and then first lights, we send someone out to check to see if the animal's there. And if there's an animal in there, and if it's old enough, we'll collar it. And so we all walk up, a minimum of 5 people, and we'll cut these ropes, and it'll collapse down on the animal. And once it's collapsed, we'll cut through the netting, and we'll slip a GPS collar on them and release them. We can lift up the bottom of the trap, and they escape at the bottom. And so that all happens within 5 minutes or less. And what we found, that we monitor it with a game camera. That's why it's facing, the game camera is facing them. And so what we found is that, and this is what the Washington tribes has taught us too, is that a lot of times they'll just relax once they're trapped. And so it's okay to leave them in there for, up to 3-4 hours. Bulls are a little different. And so we just release bulls. We don't really mess around with the bulls. So these traps are just for cows. And we're getting migration. And Thomas can share a little bit more of what kind of data we get from them. So last spring we did a Fisher project, and so that was good. We were testing out, we're looking at their travel corridors between core habitats. And so that's what this was. We just did a game cam grid. I think it was around 60-70 game cams. It was a little bit more work. We put a sock with a chicken drumstick in there, and then we had this really stinky stuff called gusto, and it's just a lure for small mammals, for trappers. And then we had a little ruler, tape measure attached to the tree to see the size. So this is a male, and you can tell by the size of the animal, fisher. And so, and we'd have to rebait it every 2 weeks, and we deployed them for 45 days, something like that. And one of the things we came across was a marijuana grow. And just recently, just Monday, so as soon as we found out it was a marijuana grow, there's pot plant holes, like as far as the eye could see, is pretty crazy. And so we reported that to the game warden, and he pulled the game cam for us. He's like, it might be dangerous if you guys go back. So he recommended just not going back to the site. So we didn't. But just last Monday, they had a helicopter and they flew all the garbage out of there. And it was 2 huge dump truck loads. So one of the concerns is how is the rodenticide affecting fisher populations, and of course Humboldt martins and a lot of other species. And so that is something we want to dive into, and kind of opened up the door for that. So yeah, that happened Monday. So a current project that we're working on, and we're gonna hopefully finish up in the next 4 months or so, is issue project, Sakpinich beaver and Kushcheep. So a lot of the same stuff for the elk project, we were just able to extend it to put another trap in Orleans, and we were able to get 2 GPS collars on this last year. And we also deployed a clover trap closer to Happy Camp, so we were able just to extend out a little bit with this project. So that was pretty awesome to have a look outside of the Somes Bar project area. With the Sakpinich, the beaver project, what we're doing there is we're just trying to get a presence absence for pre-dam removal. And so we're had some game cams at some suspected sites. So we got some presence proof. There isn't too much data like this. We do know beavers are, in and around the Klamath River, but you actually get to find more information on them when you actually look for them. And so that's what this project is about, is just like, yeah, we want to get a baseline understanding pre and post dam removal. Beaver is a keystone species, provides a lot of habitat for multiple species. And Kushcheep, porcupine, is what we did for that one was in front of all our game cams, we put a salted wood block, and we didn't get any video proof of them coming. And we kind of suspected that because we had those game cams out for a long time. So we kind of suspected that, but but there's mixed results with whether those wood blocks actually bring them in really well or not. So I've seen that in the literature that, yeah, it's just hard to debate in porcupine. And so we think that they are maybe up in higher elevation. We see sign of them potentially ringing them. It also is, the bears do that too. So not super confident on them. The crew did find some scat that they think is porcupine. And I would love to do some DNA, on some different scat that we would suspect, or even on the chews, so some things to think about. But we're going to wrap up that in the next few weeks or a few months. So we don't really have a good understanding of what kind of funding is out there, but we do want to participate in monitoring for the Ikre of Tuiship project. And here's another elk picture of Waldet. This is like 7 months later, and it's this one's in Patterson, I believe. But getting closer. We do think that the GPS collars did show that some of the elk herds will go closer to Off-Field Mountain, but the whole Off-Field Mountain, or Ikre of Tuiship, has its own herd. So we need to focus on them too, because we don't have a good understanding of that. So we want to get game cams out. We want to get elk GPS collars out. We want to put a GPS logger on turtle. And so we do need to identify some of this funding for the supplies and stuff for it. And then we would love to start acoustic recorders as well for the Ikre of Tuiship project. We did recently get funded. We haven't started any of it, but it's the Makamkuk project. Makamkuk means upslope animals in Karuk. We want to stay away from the term big game because as I was talking about before, we want to be respectful to all living things, and it's not a game to kill animals or kill anything. And so we want to stick with the Makamkuk upslope animals name. And so that's bear, panther, elk, and deer. And the idea behind this project is doing a hair snare analysis of all the 4 species and looking at their predator prey dynamics and what's going on with them. We want to get a baseline and start an understanding of what's going on with the 4 species. We want to get away from a single species management and do multiple species to understand how they're doing as a community, as an ecosystem. And so that's why we want to look at the big picture. Also want to look at before wolves come back to the area as they're coming down from Oregon. We want to understand what the current predator prey is so we can prepare for the future predator prey dynamics that will definitely change when wolves come here in the next decade or so. And then the other project is Fisher and Humboldt Martin. Will be continuing to monitor in the Donahue and coming up with a new plan to monitor for martin and Humboldt Martin and Fisher in the Donahue project area. There's also another population project that we hope to be involved in as well. But the main goal or the main methods there is doing a hair snare. And then we also got funded for a small beaver just to continue that project. And I will pass it on to Thomas. And I'm excited for the continued collaboration, collaborative traditional ecological restoration that is occurring in Karuk Aboriginal lands. And I just want to say, yo, Twakowara, thank you all for all your hard work in doing this and making this possible. Thank you.
Thomas, are you going to join us now?
Yes, sharing screen here. I'll just quickly go through some of the results of the project. I don't want to push us over time. Oh, I'm actually on the PowerPoint. Did I choose?
I think there's a share
wrong
button on the far right.
Oh, new share. Oh, yeah, I clicked my PowerPoint. Sorry about that. Okay, let me jump in here. Is the screen share working okay now?
Perfect. Looks great.
Okay. Yeah, so quickly to introduce elk in the Klamath. Many of you may know they were extirpated in the 1800s. The last elk was believed to have been seen in Siskiyou in the 1870s. And that was mainly from excessive hunting by Euro-American settlers, as well as being killed after they fed on crops in the area. Another really important thing to stress, and like we've seen today, is the positive effects, habitat effects of traditional and cultural fire practices. And when fire was basically eliminated, prescribed fire from the landscape, that we expect had a lot of negative habitat effects. Elk were reintroduced starting in the 80s, and by the mid 90s, about 232 elk were reintroduced, and it seems like the populations have been recovering very well, as we'll get into. So this project was funded by the CDFW. It's a Karuk-led project, and UC Berkeley came in as a kind of a sub collaborator on that project. So that's where I come in. I'm a postdoc at Berkeley that I've been working on this project for 2.5 years. And elk in the area now are basically completely managed by the CDFW, especially like the hunting regulations. But they don't have a good sense of population size in the area, don't have a good sense of population trend. There's a lot of questions about the elk movement, migration, and behavior. And we also focused a lot on winter habitat and population size because it's a lot easier to sample down along the Klamath, and we believe the winter habitat is the more limiting season. And so I mentioned we have this 3-year project, and that's basically over now. And we're hoping to move more towards a co-management of elk populations between the tribe and state. So here's a quick map to show the study area. I know it gets pretty busy, but we have wildfires, I think between 2013 and 18 on here. You can see the orange are prescribed burn treatments. And then as Emilio mentioned, the scat sampling and the camera trapping, you can see on the right-hand side of the screen here, this is the Soames Bar Integrated Fire Management Project area. And you can see the sampling is heavily focused in that area, both the camera traps and the circle scat samples here. Okay, and Emilio kind of covered the different sampling that we've done. I think it's really cool that it's been basically entirely non-invasive sampling for population modeling. So we have the scat DNA, the camera trapping for counts, and also the drive surveys, which we haven't really taken advantage of yet, but that's also a great data source. And a couple of pictures of those different methods. Okay, I'm going to run through some of the final results. I don't really have time to talk about the methodology of these like modeling techniques. But this model is based on camera trapping data and associated counts. And we made some novel extensions to this class of models in order to incorporate continuous environmental covariates into the model and look at elk density as a function of those covariates. So here we used forbs and grasses cover, tree cover, and elevation to estimate those effects on elk density. And you can see this map, we're seeing quite a bit of differences predicted on the landscape, anywhere from near 0 to over 3.5 elk per square kilometer. And that work is published now, so you can check that out if you're interested. I wanted to quickly talk about a cool kind of integrated model we built. I think it's cool anyway, where we're taking advantage of the scat DNA as well as the camera trapping data to get at these unique subclasses of our population that we wouldn't be able to do by looking at those data separately. So here we have an estimate of cows, bulls, female calves, and male calves in the study area. And these curves are kind of probability density distributions. So the x-axis is the number of individuals. And then you can kind of see the likelihood we're estimating for that number by these curves. And looking at the population over time, we did find evidence for an increasing population. We have 4 years of camera trapping data now. So this is based on the camera trap counts. And a pretty solid upward trend. You can see that the confidence intervals are pretty big. So we can't be highly confident about the magnitude of this trend, but it does appear that the population is increasing. I thought this figure would be cool to show the results of the GPS collar data that Emilio was talking about. You can really clearly see the migration pattern here with the group of these polygons. Each polygon is a different elk. I think we have 9 or 10 in this figure. And in the summer, they're going up to the Marble Mountains here on the right, and the winter hanging out along the Klamath and 96 here. I'm going to skip through this. It takes a little too long to explain, but we have some landscape level predictions of habitat at different kind of behavioral scales, which is kind of a cool novel analysis we did. And just to skip forward, we looked at probability of movement between migration ranges or seasonal ranges, so kind of trying to predict that migration. And we ended up doing pretty well. And this is an actual elk migration path from one of the GPS collared individuals. Okay, I think this is the coolest, maybe the coolest thing we did. So I wanted to quickly go through this. And that is, we tried to look at the effects of prescribed burn treatments on winter elk habitat. First, we fit species distribution models to elk scat collected in 2018. Back then, we didn't have much in the way of collar data. It's gone a lot better now. So our habitat variables was all vegetation data in this distribution model. And then we predicted kind of an elk habitat suitability from that, using that model. We backcasted the model to 2013 and also predicted it in 2018 and just measured the change in predicted habitat suitability between those years. We then fit another model, a lot of models going on, predicting the change in elk habitat based on what prescribed burns were occurring at that location in the landscape in each year, and as well as some terrain control variables, so elevations, the aspect southness of the slope, and the ruggedness of that area as well. And just to quickly, I think probably people are a lot more familiar with the burns in this group than I am, but broadcast burns kind of spreading across a larger area of the ground. And then we'll often see these hand pile and jackpot burns in the treatment areas as well that are more concentrated collections and burning of fuels. So really quickly, our results, it was cool to see that kind of the burns that more closely followed Karuk indigenous burns, traditional burns, had the biggest positive effect on elk habitat. And that is kind of the cyclical multi-year broadcast burns that would traditionally be a little more common on the landscape. That had a really big increase in elk habitat that we saw. And we think that basically it's opening up the understory and the ground for increased growth of the annual forbs and grasses that the elk were really positively responding to. Also, there's less cover for predators, especially the ambush predators like mountain lions that are the main predator on the landscape. Okay, I won't go into this. I think I'm over time. So, but basically, we made another web tool to try to allow managers to plan out burns if they're wanting to consider elk habitat over a 5-year period using our results. So thanks so much. Sorry I went over a little bit. Yeah, that's just an overview. We've got a couple papers if you want to learn more, and a really big report just into CDFW, like 72 pages, that hopefully will be accessible for people soon.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Emilio and Thomas. Beautiful, beautiful presentation. We are at about 3:55, so I'm going to jump into questions, and I'll keep going about 5 minutes over for those who want to stay, but I know some will have to pop off at 4. So the first question I see from Lulu in the Q&A, did you survey for costs cheap in the same area as the Fisher area?
No, we just surveyed in the areas that were what we were doing for the elk project. But yeah, that we do want to understand that better. So in the future, we'll try to do that.
I also see some questions here in the chat. Or Dean Davis said, cost cheap, leave quill traces in the dirt where they walk, and many were poisoned in the Klamath in the 1970s. And Lulu also says, I've used salt blocks on a porcupine survey in the Beaver Creek area and at the Shasta Valley Wildlife area, also used cams in the areas. It was very interesting. Thanks for sharing your experience, guys. And then a question from Ani. Are the migration pattern polygons gathered from just 1 year from different individuals or different years, same individuals?
Yeah, so those polygons are based on all the total data we have for each individual. So yeah, you can see that some of the polygons didn't really have that full pattern yet. And I think those are the elk collared this year that haven't really been in the summer range for their full season yet. And then I totally forgot to mention that you could see one of the Orleans herd collar polygons kind of down to the south. I could share again just to talk about that. But yeah, we're really interested to see, as I think as Emilio might have mentioned, this southern herd or individual here, will they do a migration pattern of some kind, maybe up to the Siskiyous, or are they a year-round herd? And yeah, Emilio could talk more about that too if he wants.
Yeah, I mean, we're just excited to get them on multiple herds, and there's so many more herds that we don't know anything about as far as their migration and routes. And yeah, they might be resident herds. A lot of the times we see these herds year round, and we don't know if they're going all the way up to the high country and then coming back, or if they're just around in the lower elevations all year long. So yeah, exciting to learn more about them as we're able to get GPS collars on.
Really, so a question I have about, how much you can extrapolate from the findings that you have to some other herds, or, how you're thinking about understanding across entire Aboriginal territory. Is that, to get a lot more collars on a lot more herds, or are you able to kind of extrapolate that out to some degree somehow based on your model?
I don't know. You want to answer that, Thomas? Like, yeah, there's some interest in it. We want to look at some type of migration plotting tools that might look at the landscape and replicate, what they're seeing from one GPS collar as far as the low cost migration corridors, but we haven't got there yet.
Yeah, I can add in. My internet kind of dipped a little bit as you were asking the question, but I think I heard you talking about like choosing new herds, or can we use the current data to like extrapolate to other areas? I think we can. It's always good to have more individuals from different herds to make sure that our findings are generalizable and can be transferred. But yeah, I think we could like use those, especially the migratory elk, and use those models to predict maybe, I know there's been some interest in, like, is there a disease risk with elk hoof disease that we've been seeing in nearby regions? We could predict, what is the connectivity and likely migration paths from those regions to our study area and the Karuk territory. So yeah, but it would be great to get more data. We're hoping that more funding will come from the state and other projects for a more permanent elk study.
And better. My other question was on the fire results you were sharing, Thomas. I know you were moving through things pretty quick, and I appreciate you shared a lot of information in a pretty short time. I saw that you were saying broadcast burning and repeated broadcast burning seemed to be the best. And then I was wondering what the findings were on the piles and the jackpot.
Sorry, the audio cut for me as you were saying broadcast burning the first time. I'm sorry, I didn't get the full.
Oh, is my audio cutting for everyone?
No.
Oh, maybe you take it, Emilio.
Yeah, so basically it was for broadcast and stack pile jackpot burns, and for stack and pile burns, it was a negative to no effect response. So the elk didn't go to those areas. We thought they would, but yeah, it was either a negative effect or no effect. And the only ones that they really paid attention to was the broadcast burns, where it was a positive effect, where they just were drawn to it. And so yeah.
Yeah, I should say there was one interesting pattern where if there was a jackpot burn followed by multiple years of broadcast burning, that had a super high positive effect. So potentially, like, getting rid of an intense amount of fuels, clearing the area, and then burning the a little more broadly on the understory and ground seemed to have actually the highest positive effect. But otherwise, yeah, it was just the broadcast burns, and especially multi-year broadcast burns.
Very cool. If anybody else has any questions, please put them in the chat or the Q&A. And Ben, I wanted to see if you maybe had something you wanted to add, or
something real quick from just observation. From an observation standpoint, there was like 2 or 3 cameras, and also from Mike Palmetier's observations from seeing elk in pile burn areas. There were a few areas that actually the elk utilized after it was mechanically cleared and piled and burned. And so that was that's an interesting thing from from just observations driving up and down the road.
very interesting. So there's more to the story, perhaps.
Yeah, I think so. And I should stress too that this study was from burns between 2013 and 2018. And that data set actually had no mechanical thinning. It was all either like hand work with the jackpot and hand pile burns. So that could be a factor, like it just wasn't the power to gather as much fuels. I'm not sure. But it'd be interesting to do this again with some of the more like mechanical thinning treatments in there as well.
I'm sure that's affecting light quite a bit too. Ani says, yes, I would love to see that. Another study. Well, awesome job, guys. Any closing remarks from any of you? I know we're already a few minutes over, but really appreciated learning more about what you're doing and what you're finding. It's super, super cool, and I look forward to digging into those papers you mentioned. Thanks everybody so much for joining us today. We look forward to having a second WKRP Speaker Series on the 29th at 2 p.m. again, 2 to 4. And that will be another 2 great presentations. So see you then. Thanks for joining us. Yo.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Suunik.